And just to add to what Marcus said, I've been a long-time member of the community. I can still remember when I saw on the mailing list when Marcus and Denny announced Semantic Media Wiki version 0.76, so it wasn't even version 1. So, I was already playing with it back then, and we've been playing with it since. I've been trying to give back to the community. So, just some background. Actually, let me start the presentation. So I'm going to talk about link answers for smart cities, smarter cities. Basically, what happened was about a year ago, I left the company I was with, where I was heading up the knowledge engineering practice, which is basically using semantic technologies, and we use a lot of SMW. And we started this company called Ontodia, which is a mashup of ontology and Wikipedia. And our take is the giant global graph, or the semantic web, is made up of people collaborating together, facilitated by machines. And I'm based here in New York. And in New York, there's this contest called Big Axe. And this year, we were blessed to have won the grand prize. With our submission, we call NYC Facets, and we use SMW for that. And the year previous to that, before I spoke out on my own, we also won in the same contest the large organization award, and I was still with that consulting company. We partnered with another semantic technology company, Reveletics, and their partner Scribe, and also some SMW was used in that submission as well. So, in a nutshell, NYC DataWeb, which we created 2 years back, was Query Federator. So we use Reveletics, and we built some dashboards using SMW and some other tools, but we were using the Reveletics tool stack to basically do query federation. And then this year, we created basically a data dictionary, organizing all the metadata that New York City was exposing. It was not really exposing, so we had to extract it from the catalog that New York City had. And we were actually surprised when we won prize, because it was, we thought, this is a developer tool that we didn't really have any hopes that we will win a grand prize, but we were surprised, or wasn't surprised we did. And now our future is what we're building, is what we're calling the Smarter City platform, called Pediacities, and once again, we'll be using a lot of SMW components. And hopefully too, when Wikidata is ready, we want one of the first Wikidata enabled sites. So that's what we're working on. So, but before I talk about Pediacities, let me talk about a little story about New York City and data. So New York, everybody knows where it is. And as I'd like to say, it has the benefit of having the original data geek as its mayor. If you're not familiar with Mayor Bloomberg, basically he made his money organizing financial data on Wall Street way back when, back in the early 80s, when Wall Street was not really that automated. And New York City is, I like the city of superlatives, right? It has all these big numbers, and the good thing about it, it has, in our minds, the density for us to do something like a semantic web in the small. And that's what we're trying to do. And another benefit of New York City is just this year, it passed a law mandating that all the data sets that are maintained by 100-some city agencies are released to the public over time, with the target that by 2018, the majority of all the data maintained by all the city agencies, from the police department, from the building inspection, everything from 311 complaints, pothole complaints, noise complaints, building inspections, building permits will be available to the public. And the good thing about New York City, unlike other tech hubs, is it has all other a lot of data-driven industries that are headquartered in New York. So some people are now pushing, instead of calling it Silicon Alley, calling it Data Gotham, the Empire State of Data. And the good thing about that, all these people need this data, right? The city is starting to increase. And this full program of releasing the data is part of this digital roadmap the city has embarked on. It's really quite ambitious. First of all, they appointed the first chief digital officer in the US. That's Rachel Houth, as you can see here. And they have started some other programs to compete with other tech hubs. Like, so they have created this university, Cornell Technion, and then there's another applied research institute that they're starting on urban informatics. Hopefully we'll be working with them soon. And they have several incubators that they have started in the city, which they're supporting, and I'm actually a beneficiary of that, where I'm in the incubator right now, the Varick Incubator, collaborating with NYU, having access to faculty and the students and all the city agencies. And they keep pushing this initiative, and just about a month ago, they updated it, detailing what the city wants to do in the balance of the mayor's term. So because of all this activity, right now, New York City is the fastest growing tech hub in the world. And what the city did to highlight that growth is they created this map. They called it the Made in New York digital map, where basically you can look for all the companies in New York, right? Oh, excuse me. Sorry about that. And what they did is, apologize. Bear with me here. Sorry about that. So they're trying to show all these activities so people can look for certain companies. But the way they did it is it was very high on eye candy, but it wasn't really through faceted search. So when they released the data behind the digital jobs map, this is Rachel Houth, the chief digital officer, and she was saying, "Oh, we release it, the following week, over the weekend, basically we did a faceted search of what they released. And here it is. Basically, for people who use Exhibit, it's really nothing fancy. So now, instead of basically having to go to all 2,000 companies manually, just by clicking on markers, they can do real faceted search. So to them, that was quite innovative, but to us, it was just, we're doing a faceted search treatment. We just use Exhibit for that, but it was through faceted search. And when we did that earlier this summer, we said we wanted to really extend it. We wanted to link it up with other data sets. So about late last month, this is Andrew Nicklin, who is the Open Data Czar, the guy who maintains all the open data, who manages the Open Data Initiative here in New York. He updated that data, the data set that shows all the companies in New York. And we extended our remix. So we did geonames and collaborated it with Crunchbase too. So by linking it up, now people can ask, show me all companies in Chelsea who are 5 years old in this industry with less than 50 employees and have funding. Right? So that's a major leap in functionality just by linking it up with its data sources. And our proposition is, I'll skip the demo because we don't have time. So what if we can do this kind of mashup with any NYC open data set? Right now, there are about 800 data sets that the city is releasing, but it's anticipated by the time all the agencies release all the data that the open data law is mandating, that there will be about 40,000 data sets that will be available to the general public. So the thing with all those data sets is, and we know this firsthand, is it's very dirty. So there needs to be a lot of cleaning and normalizing before we can link it up. And that's what we're doing with Vidiasity's Smarter City platform. In Semtech San Francisco earlier this summer, we made an announcement, and our announcement there was our intent is to make New York City the first city in the linked data cloud, and we're still going ahead with that program. Because we believe that open data is a killer app of linked data, and vice versa. Because right now, at least here in the US, I don't know in Germany, a lot of people are talking about big data. Now open data is getting a lot of traction. I was at Washington, D.C. at the World Bank, and they held this International Open Government Data Conference. And everybody's excited because if you think about it, the state is the biggest producer of data, and that's all paid for by taxpayers already, right? And then there's this another buzzword that's been emerging, data science, because now we need to have data scientists analyze all this data. But in my mind, and I don't know if you agree, at the end of the day, this is just data, right? But the good thing is, now that we have this mass of data, now that we have the necessary metadata that we can leverage to link it up, right? It's not that trivial, of course, as you know, if you work with any of these open data sets, it's very dirty. There's a lot of quality issues, but I think that's one of the value adds that we can offer. Because if you think about it, right now, this is the workflow as we see it when people deal with trying to get information from data. Right? So you have this process that people have labeled data wrangling. So you have the boss, I want to get some reports, right? And here's the data, and you have the data wranglers basically trying to round it up, doing ETL, extract, transform, and load, or load, or what I like to call expensive transformational loading. And then once they get the data, then the quants and the data scientists, they just basically hang back. I have a friend who's a quant in Wall Street, and he doesn't deal with the transaction data. Basically, he would just tell the IT guys, I need this data for analysis. And then by the time he gets it, it's a few days old. Well, I need to do this. So the quants are just hanging back and waiting for the data. And what we want to offer is, what if we can minimize this data wrangling, if not eliminate it altogether? Because as we see it, like Bloomberg, what he did for Wall Street, he back then people were collecting data independently, and he was saying, this was from his autobiography, they were practically relying on this ancient tools. And what he could offer with Bloomberg is a system that can do this at a fraction of the price. So the way we see it is, this is data wrangling, what we are now in the open data world, right? And this is what we wanted to basically copying from the Bloomberg paper. And we have 4 guidelines that we're doing, that we're following in that mission. So right now, we want to extract answers from raw data. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this TED Talk by Sir Tim Berners-Lee on the 20th anniversary of the web. He had this great talk, and if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you look for it, where he basically asks for people to release raw data now, specifically open data, government data, because it's all paid for by taxpayers already. And he said, if once you release the data, that people will innovate on it. And that was about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, on the 20th anniversary of the web. And sure enough, be careful what you ask for. A lot of governments have started releasing the data. But what we want to do now is take it to the next step and get answers from that raw data. And also we want to make it human usable. So I'm sure everybody's familiar with Wikipedia. If I look up Times Square in Wikipedia, this is what I get. Some people say, this is not really meant for people to look at. And maybe that's why it's like this, but my question is, why not, right? Maybe we can make it human usable as well, right? We say human readable, machine readable, but being readable is different from being usable. And another thing that we're trying to do is make it accessible to the regular developer. So he doesn't need to know ontologies, he doesn't need to know Sparkle. All he needs to do is what he knows now, and he can start using this linked data. And I don't know how you learn a lot of your the things that you do now, So when I went to computer science about 20 years ago, when I finished my degree, back then I studied Pascal and COBOL and all these things that are now obsolete, right? So a lot of people learn by basically looking at design patterns and looking at pre-existing work. So what we're trying to do is we will show you the result, the linked answers, and hopefully you'll be peaked enough, okay, I need to change the query so it gets this additional field or this additional data set. Then if they peel the covers under the hood, they can see the sparkle. And then maybe they can start learning how to do it. And we've done the mapping already. And finally, what we want to enable is this thing we're calling 6-star data. If you follow the link open data conversation, certain Berners-Lee came up with this 5-star rating system, where basically he said it's available 1 star, it's machine readable, it's 2 stars, it's non-proprietary format, it's 3 stars. And then if you publish it as RDF, you have 4 stars, and then once you link it up, they have 5-star data. But I think we need to take it a step further. And even Tim recognized that, because if you look at this paragraph, he said, in 2010, this is 2 years ago, some government people have been pressing, maybe there should be a requirement about the metadata. And that's what we're trying to do, is maybe, we have that decision that the 6-star have a lot of metadata about this data that we're exposing. So those are the 4 guidelines we are following in creating Pediacities. And going back, we're concentrating on the answers, not the raw data. So we don't want to boil the ocean, so we're just talking about answers about the city. Let me take that back actually. So right now, I can ask this question, and all these underlying things are available data sets that we can do federated query against, right? And these are the kind of people who can use this data. I've been involved in other semantic technology projects with some Fortune 500 companies, and my frustration back then was a lot of these projects were dealing with exotic life science data or proprietary enterprise data. And it was only a limited number of people who really appreciated what that data was for. Right? At least this kind of data, open data, is something that we all can appreciate and we all paid for. So, and we all can use, so from residents to businesses, to governments, to visitors. And I just want to highlight this last user. As you can see, give me all these queries, JSON format, once a day at 1 a.m. EST. And I want historical data as well, so I can do some time series analysis. And this is the kind of thing we want to enable so people can innovate downstream from the data. So, and how do we plan to do that? So all these people are users, right? And the way we limit the context is, we just concentrating on a city, right now in New York City. And we're building this platform, this data exchange of linked data. And on top of that, hopefully we'll start creating a network of smarter cities. And hopefully an ecosystem will thrive on that network. And we already started with NYC Facets, and we're going forward. And the way we see it, these users engage with our proposed platform using apps. But our definition of apps is not really your smartphone apps, but anything that uses data, right? It could be a feed, a website, analytics, anything that uses data, because at the end of the day, we see apps are nothing more than specialized perspective and bundlings of high quality data, right? We just transform it. But at the end of the day, it starts from the data. When you do any systems development, you start with the data. And right now, this is how people do data wrangling, or what I'd like to call a spaghetti architecture, right? Point to point most of the time. Even with all these web services and APIs, it's point to point connections. And I don't need to tell everybody, in my mind, the super API is Sparta. Right? Once you have a good data catalog and you virtualize the data, you only need one API, in a standard space API. And that's what we're trying to do. is we are trying to create this data virtualization layer where we map all the data sets to a common ontology, a city ontology, and then we also maintain a lot of the metadata about the data sets. And we're partnered with a firm, Reveletics, to do that. I don't know if you're familiar with this firm. Basically, they do a lot of work with the U.S. Department of Defense. They were responsible for creating the HR Federation. The biggest organization in the U.S. is, not surprisingly, the government, but the second biggest is the military. And so there are about more than 1 million personnel in the military, and they have different profiles. But what if I needed somebody who speaks Farsi, who has this skill, who has this pay grade? Back before Reveletics built their HR Federation system, you have to go to multiple HR systems to get that question answered. So they built a federation layer. So now there's one way of virtually looking at all the human resources of the military. And we're leveraging the same approach. And we're computing, because we're focusing on answers, we're pre-computing some of the answers in Sparkle and then persisting it using Hadoop. And that will all be available in the cloud. And just to give you a foretaste of the user interface, a lot of this is also using SMW. So here's our API, or what I like to call answering people's interrogatives, or answering people interface. And we want to be able to answer this kind of questions, right? So we can show you, okay, and right now these are kind of questions regular people can understand. For French restaurants in Times Square, the Wi-Fi and parking, all these is available in the data sets the city is exposing, and we're doing federated queries behind the scenes. And then we're computing these answers and then showing it. And then not only do we, a lot of these open data initiatives, most of the time, they only show you the current data. They never show you the historical data. So one of the things that we want to do too is archive the data as they change it. And we also archive the answers as the answers change over time. So people can do longitudinal studies and compare trends over time. And going back to the answering people interface API, our form API is people can ask a question and then they can select, if they want to select some data sets and the frequency of the answers that they want, the date range, if they want to include historical data. And because we don't want to force people to learn a technology they're not familiar with, they can specify what format they want it in. And the only thing that we're going to do is on the terms of service, we will specify, because all the link answers will have URIs that point back to our version of DBpedia, which is human usable. So that's the only thing that we ask them is don't change those URIs, because it points back to, so say if you want that list of French restaurants and you click on Le Bernardin, when you click on that, it will almost be like a high resolution DBpedia of that entity that shows, okay, this is a French restaurant and it's in this building and it's in this neighborhood, and then you can explore the high resolution data, all the metadata that we organize about Bernardin, its neighborhood, and whatever that building it's in, and if it's next to other businesses. Right now we're still building a lot of these things, and here's another, when we started out, this is one of the inspiration that we followed when we started creating Pediacity. So let me see if you can hear this. You know what? I guess you can't. But if you haven't seen this, once again, I highly encourage you to look for this talk. It's called, let me see, if I can just bring it to that point where it's most interesting. This is Hans Rosling. If you haven't seen his TED Talk, he gave his TED Talk in 2006, where he was saying that, if I can just talk over what he was proposing. This is how people were maintaining data. All the government agencies were maintaining data back then. So it was behind, you have to pay for it, which was ridiculous because that's taxpayer paid data. And then it's behind these firewalls. and it's basically just rows and rows and data, right? And he said we could make that better. And his proposition was, raw data is not enough, right? Because raw data, you need it, but you need to tell stories about the data. And he was proposing that you need to marry data with design. And you need to visualize and interpret this data so regular people can understand it. And he was proposing to use these tools. So in his mind, the missing piece that we need, and remember this is back in 2006, is there needs to be a search function so the public, or data scientists, or researchers, innovators, entrepreneurs can search the data. And then once they have the data, they can then transform it so they can tell stories about the data, right? About and with the data. And back then he said, when he was trying to do that, he basically wants to create this garden of knowledge based on all this linked data. This was a metaphor he was using, but this is all linked underneath. And that was back in 2006, and he was ending his talk by saying, when he told the UN, the World Bank, and all these people who were sitting on tons of data, that we need to do this. And the UN guy said, it's not impossible, but it's not doable. But we submit that this is doable, and our ambition is that we could become, at least for this city, for cities, maybe starting it small, so we have context and not boiling the ocean. We could be that search function that Hans Rosling was looking for in 2006. And just wanted to say that we stood on the shoulders of giants. A lot of these things were built by people, and we just basically are practitioners in applying it to this problem. And what we want to do is create this small sandbox, not that small, here in New York City, so we can have this garden of knowledge that's available to the general public. And it's all supported by linked data standards. And that's what we're trying to do in our ambition to make New York City the first linked data city. Because our belief is, if you recall your history, the first states were city-states, and they basically rose on riverbanks because rivers afforded access to water, which was the lifeblood, of the economy back then. It provided transportation, hygiene, you can wash, you can drink, everything, right? You can cook with it. And nowadays, in the post-industrial age, we believe that data is the lifeblood of the post-industrial age. And we're in previewing the platform. So since I'm an alumni of Big Apps, we're giving invitation-only access to the next crop of Big Apps entrants, which is going to be announced next month. And we're launching first half of 2013. And by then it will be, anybody can use this to basically innovate on New York City data. And speaking of New York City, Marcus, I don't know if I should announce it now. I guess if there don't be any focus, I'll go ahead and say it. Is SMWCon 2013 will be here in New York City. It will be at NYU ITP, which is the MIT Media Lab of NYU. Just to give you a flavor of what's in ITP, they promote themselves as the center for the recently possible. These are the kind of projects and initiatives that they are exploring. They pride themselves in trying to be at the intersection of liberal arts, social sciences, and technology. That's why they have all these kind of projects. Yeah, I like that plant headphone. And this wooden mirror run by Arduino actuators. Anyway, it will be at the NYU campus, right around the corner from Washington Square Park. And I had the honor of being nominated as general chair, and joining me would be Aaron as local chair and Laurent from J&J. as a program chair, and we'll be happy to see you here in New York. And by then too, we can also hope that we can give you access to what we're trying to do here in New York City, make all this linked data available for all their innovations. Thank you.
Thanks, Joel. That was really great. And indeed, we are very much looking forward to going to the Linked Data City next time, and only well roughly 6 months from now usually. I think this is something to seriously consider, even if you are here in Europe and from Europe, because that is certainly a great venue and a great city to be in as well. And you have seen how many inspiring things we have gotten from this community, and you can imagine the community is largely disjointed. There are another group of people over there who also do awesome stuff and have things to present, and I'm sure there will be much in that event as well. But first, let me thank you again for that very interesting talk, and maybe we have some questions about it as well. Yeah, Benedict, let us know if you can hear him.
Yes, I can hear.
Hi, Joel. Thanks for your talk. So I'm very interested in your statement that you want to avoid, or you want to, so data wrangling should not be existing anymore. And I'm wondering, how do you think that should be possible using Semantic Media Wiki in the end, that you do the data wrangling collaboratively within the Semantic Media Wiki?
Well, can you repeat that? It was a bit terrible. Is that Denny?
Yeah, so that was Benedict talking about asking you whether the tedious task of data wrangling could be done collaboratively using Semantic Media Wiki.
I'm sorry, Marcus, it's breaking up a bit. Can you?
Okay, try to repeat again. The question was whether data wrangling can be done in Semantic Media Wiki in a collaborative fashion, or maybe more generally, if the media, what role you see for Semantic Media Wiki in that task.
Okay, so right now, in terms of scaling, we're using Semantic Media Wiki for basically organizing the questions and the answers. But the data inside the answers we don't organize. We don't do that in Semantic Media Wiki. Basically, we're looking at Semantic Media Wiki as more of a smart CMS, where we can have this high-level concepts of questions and answers. And also what we're doing too is we're trying to build almost like an NYCpedia. Because what we're doing is when we crawl the open data catalog that the city is exposing, is we normalize the data, and then once we normalize it, is we pump it into an instance of Semantic Media Wiki as almost like a human usable version of DBpedia that people can look at for, okay, if I'm looking for things in this neighborhood, it's like a high resolution DBpedia, but user-friendly. And then what we're doing too is in terms of creating the city ontology is we're marking up all those pages with schema.org tags, right? Because the beauty of it is schema.org is organizing all these concepts now that are in the city. It has concepts of organization of a business, of a place, right? It has a concept of restaurants. It has a concept of all these things that, I don't need to worry about, because now, the W3C, Microsoft, and Google, they're hashing out that schema already. And we're just aligning ourselves, and we're marking it up with maybe, we hope with RDFA, if not or some microformats. And then the beauty of that is the NYCpedia, where all the answers linked to become a Google honeypot, right? Because it's all schema.org tag as well. So we're using Semantic Media Wiki more as a way to expose the data, but the actual computation of the Sparkle queries will be done on the back end using the Revelytics back end.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? There's one. you can. I can also repeat
Maybe it's just I'm curious about that back end. Actually, I can also shout across the room if that helps. I don't know. Can you hear me? No.
You might want to speak to it.
Okay. Actually, the question was about the back end. Is this I mean, you mentioned Hadoop as a store, and is that what you're talking about as the back end? And yeah.
So we partnered with Webelytics, and they have this, what they're calling a data management, distributed information management system. And on the back end is this thing. Actually, if you want, they haven't really announced it yet. They have this new product called Loom, where you can have a pipeline of basically Sparkle queries that you can pre-compute, and then the answers are deposited in the cloud. So that's where the Hadoop part comes in. As we partnered with Webelytics, they have built this mechanism whereby once the data is organized, we can create Sparkle queries, and then that is computed on a schedule, and then they have a Hadoop pipeline to do that, and then all the pre-computed answers are then deposited and persisted in a store on the cloud.
Does it answer? Yeah. Okay. Great. Any other questions? Okay. Seeing none for the moment. Well, Yuri has one actually. Yeah. Please.
So my question is whether the Semantic Media Wiki core and related extensions will leverage from your use cases. So how much engaged are you in the community work now?
Right now, we're beneficiaries of the community. If there's anything that we think, I believe in the O'Reilly doctrine, right, which is create more value than you capture. So I think the link, in my mind, the Link Data Cloud will only be successful if people can use things freely. So we will make connectors for people to connect to this link answers, and we will. Our aim is to give it to the community as open source connectors. And if you're a researcher, if you're a non-commercial user, we'll give you access to the data catalog, for free as well. That is our intent. So as we connect and access to the data, we'll expose it to the community.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Again, we have to mute and unmute you. That's why there's some gaps sometimes. So don't be surprised about people jumping here. Okay, so any further questions about that? If not, I suggest we thank Joel again for this very inspiring talk, and certainly we hope to see you again in New York soon, in March. I think with please, yeah. I think with this we have to terminate this connection, but you are invited to join us back as a guest in the public stream, right? So this should continue. Okay, very good.